distinguished participants, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the African Energy Commission and the partners that we're working with on this webinar, that is the United Nations Environment Programme and the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, CCIC, I welcome you to this dialogue, basically focusing on the critical issue of clean cooking in Africa. For those on the continent, this is a daily reality that we go through, where 4 out of 5 people or 4 out of 5 households rely on traditional cooking fuels, a burden that has been severe and adverse with significant impacts on gender equality, public health, and climate. This silent crisis contributes to over 800,000 premature deaths annually, with women and children bearing the heaviest burden of lack of clean cooking access, or lack of access to clean cooking. Beyond health, the lack of access to clean cooking traps millions in poverty, with a population spending a significant time of their productive livelihoods trying to fetch firewood and also cooking longer than it should be in reality. So with this in mind, we are having this dialogue to reflect on the realities of clean cooking in Africa, what we have as our hope, and what the future would look like as we focus towards transitioning to more clean cooking fuels. So today's session marks the first in a series of 3 sessions that will be leading to the second summit on clean cooking in Africa that will be held mid this year in Nairobi. And over the next 1.5 hours, we will proceed in 3 segments. So the first segment will be mainly an opening remarks for our distinguished guests. We'll be making brief remarks. And then this will be followed up by a high-level panel of industry leaders on this sector, and also people who are contributing significantly in terms of policy development on clean cooking in Africa. After that, we'll have an open session where you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and also get reactions from the panelists. However, at any point, in case any question pops up, feel free to use the Q&A functionality to post your question. We'll be able to pick it up and make sure that that question is addressed, looking at the time that will be available for that session. So before we begin, I will have a few 2 housekeeping rules so that you're able to have a productive session. Just to repeat, the first one, which is for you to be able to select a language of your preference. We have English and French, so feel free to make a selection. And then number 2, we will be recording this session. So in case you have any reservations, please feel free to let us know. But this session is officially recorded, and we'll be using it to disseminate the discussion that we'll be having today in the days to come. So lastly, to emphasize, ask the questions at any time using the Q&A functionality. So to start us off, at this point, I would wish to welcome our Executive Director, the Executive Director for the African Energy Commission, Mr. Rashid Ali Abdallah, to make some opening remarks. Over to you, Director.
Thank you very much, Samson. Mr. Martino Otto, Head of Climate and Clean Energy Coalitions, distinguished delegates who join us, also my colleagues, the panelists, join us, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It is an honor to me to welcome all of you on behalf of African Union and African Energy Commission Africa to this vital dialogue, which aim to unveil the reality of the clean cooking in Africa and the champion the hope for sustainable future. The past 2 years represent a turning point for clean cooking, propelled by the strengthening policies and renewed political commitment in Africa with access increase by 20% more comparing to the previous decades. After the first Clean Cooking Summit in Africa that took place in Paris in May 2024, the African Energy Commission, AFRIC, under the auspices of the African Clean Cooking Program, launched the Sustainable Scaling, Meeting the Clean Cooking Challenge in Africa report at COP29. The publication prepared in partnership with Modern Energy Cooking Service Mix and the World Bank highlight the staggering cost of inaction of 791 billion annually through the negative externality on health, gender equality, and climate. In February 2025, the African Union Assembly, comprising of the head of state and government, officially adopt the resolution establish access to the clean cooking as the top continental priority, with more African governments reporting clean cooking policies. This was reinforced by South Africa G20 presidency, which adopted the Voluntary Infrastructure Investment Action Plan on Clean Cooking for mobilizing resources. Despite this notable progress, the pace of the access to the clean cooking remain insufficient to meet our 2030 target. The 2025 SDG report published by AFRIC this year reveals that only 35% of African population has access to the clean cooking solution. This leaves over 940 million people depend on polluting fuel, with unsustainable biomass making up nearly half of the African final energy consumption. This facts call for mobilization of finance, aligning strategic policies, and fostering accountability in the reporting of access number and impact. It is required that we embrace African-led solution, integrated clean cooking into the national energy and economic planning, enhancing financing, and adopt diverse fuel options for meaningful impact. Let me now focus on some important points that I need to highlight. First, insight from the past 2 decades of electrification demonstrated that increased allocation from the government budget, partners' contribution, and crowdfunding are essential for advancing energy access. For example, contribution from citizen channels through rural electrification fund across Africa have facilitated electricity access for millions. Therefore, the question to ask ourselves is why are we not repurposing or expanding electrification fund to the encompass clean cooking? Second, advancing clean cooking agenda means recognizing that one size not fit all. Local context, from the infrastructure to the household needs, determine that the best path forward, whether a family move from 3-stone fire to an improved cook stove, LPG, natural gas, or electric cookers, we must keep a diverse basket of solutions at the heart of our strategy to ensure practical and immediate change. Third, clean cooking solution must be embedded directly into the local development agenda. It is crucial to transition the manufacturing and supply chain of this technology into Africa. This localization will stimulate local economies, empower community, and accelerate energy access across the continent. In conclusion, I would like to thank our partner, the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP, and the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, CCAC, for co-hosting this dialogue with Africa. I also thank you for joining and look forward to an open discussion that will yield hope for the women and girls that bear the heaviest burden of cooking poverty. Your insight today will help shape our unified African voice for upcoming summit in Nairobi. Ladies and gentlemen, while the challenge of providing clean cooking for all may seem unsurmounted, our collective voice and action is vital to addressing the issue. Inspired by Wangari Maathai hummingbird, we must all do our part rather than stand by for mere talking, helping to solve the puzzle of 1 billion people without access. Thank you very much, and I wish you all fruitful exchange and insightful dialogue. Thank you. Hand over to you, next one.
Thank you, Director, for those inspiring words. Indeed, we must, all of us, do our parts, our responsibility, whether we are in academia, in industry, we are financing, we have to do our part in contributing to the clean cooking agenda in Africa. So allow me to welcome Ms. Martina, who will be speaking on behalf of the UNEP Director. Over to you, Martina.
Thank you so much, and also a big thank you to Rashid. It's a real pleasure to have teamed up with Africa here, and I say that on behalf of UNEP, so representing both the regional office, the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, and the UNEP convened Climate and Clean Air Coalition. We're really a warm welcome to this first policy dialogue on clean cooking. And you left us off with Wangari, and I had the pleasure of meeting her when she had gotten the Nobel Peace Prize, and she was telling the story of the colibri that you're making reference to. And let us be inspired not only by the colibri who goes and says, well, the forest is on fire, and I come drop by drop, I do my bit, but also by the speed of the wings that is absolutely amazing, and we have to actually deploy our wings and get more speed into this agenda. Now, said that, clean cooking is a hot topic, no pun intended. It has made it onto the agenda of the African Union Summit 2026, where it featured very prominently as a cross-cutting issue, as it is tied to, and we heard that already, to health, to climate, and to development. This comes against the background, and we heard the numbers already, that nearly 1 billion Africans still lack access to clean cooking solutions, making it both an unacceptable humanitarian and climate challenge. Another eminent Kenyan, President William Ruto of Kenya, will host the second IEA summit in July, and he stressed how central clean cooking is to Africa's energy transition and to the public health agenda. African Union leaders have framed the clean cooking as a continental priority, linking it as well to the African Union's Agenda 2063 goals. At the CCAC, together with the African Union Commission, we lead the Africa Clean Air Program, which builds directly on a scientific foundation that the integrated assessment of air pollution and climate change for sustainable development in Africa that we actually put together with the input from over 100 African scientists and institutions. And it also responds to an AMSEN call for continent-wide effort. Now, this assessment that I alluded to, it identified 37 priority measures across 5 sectors, including residential energy, that would allow the continent to reduce air pollution, to combat climate change, and to advance its Agenda 2063. And implementing, I want to highlight that, implementing these 37 measures would actually prevent 880,000 premature deaths annually by 2063 on the continent, would also help improve crop yields, another key concern. If we talk about cooking, we need also something to cook, and to align with the 1.5 global warming pathway. Now, clean cooking was identified as one of the most immediate and high impact interventions in the residential energy sector, no surprise. And accelerating the transition away from polluting solid fuels could significantly reduce black carbon emissions and thereby improve air quality and also prevent tens of thousands of premature deaths, particularly among women and children that we already singled out as the most vulnerable here. Countries are pursuing multi-fuel strategies to make good on this, and there are many different fuel solutions, including biogas, LPG, ethanol, solar cookers, and so on. But at the UN, our focus is on investment strategies for non-fossil fuel Tier 4 plus technologies, offering a path to sustainability and the numerous co-benefits. And that includes, obviously, electric cooking, which will be discussed here in more depth. And it actually fits within this broader energy context. Last year, the UN Secretary General launched a report on clean energy, and that was called Seizing the Moment of Opportunity, and that emphasized that renewable energy has passed a tipping point in quite a few markets and application areas, making it often the cheapest means to provide clean energy to all, bolstering jobs, health, food security, and energy security, and more. Now, the continent obviously has an amazing resource endowment waiting to be harnessed and unlocking jobs, unlocking energy security, energy independence, and so on. I often hear from our energy transition colleagues that there's a lack of stable demand, and that therefore it's hard to do the supply side. Well, cooking for sure is a stable demand. I also hear very often that electric cooking is too expensive. Well, then let's flip the question.
L'acquisition électrique est trop chère. Je vais vous poser une question. Comment
that we've seen already in some markets, the advances in mini and microgrids that are not only options for rural communities, but can be deployed also at neighborhood scale in cities, that are helping to shave off peak load in energy demand, and also to build energy solutions differently, distributed, decentralized, democratic, and disruptive. Now, to drive such a green energy transition in areas where markets remain undeveloped or underdeveloped, interventions are necessary to stimulate both the supply and the demand. We need to create markets for transformative technologies, such as the renewably powered electric cooking appliances, and that takes building new partnerships. And here the private sector actors are really important, and so are the financial institutions. So there's a story around sharing responsibilities, including also within the UN, and also looking at last mile communities where there is a significant and growing need for clean, modern cooking solutions. And one example of this is the multi-stakeholder Solco partnership supported by UNEP and launched as part of the Global Electric Cooking Coalition at COP28. And Solco aims to provide affordable clean cooking solutions across the African continent through a broader category of solar PV supported technologies. And that not only reduces household air pollution and GHG emissions, but also addresses gender-based issues, looking at violence, exposure, but also deforestation, bringing it back to Wangari Maathai. So we are happy to take these solutions forward, both in the CCAC Household Energy Hub, the African Clean Air Program that I mentioned, but also our project work. And here to highlight that we launched an eCooking challenge that was closed, launched it for to receive proposals. It was closed at the end of the year. So watch the space. There will be more activities coming forward. And with that, I'll hand it back and look forward to an interesting discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martina, for those inspiring words, for emphasizing on the aspects of climate, the contribution of the natural resource we have in Africa, and definitely the opportunity to create more livelihoods out of the clean cooking value chains. Thank you very much. So I will go straight to the presentations because of time. I would bring in Ed to make his presentation. I give you 10 minutes. So please try to keep the time.
Thank you. I'm just trying to make sure I can get my presentation up. There. Could you confirm that you can see my slides okay, Nixon?
Yeah, it's working well.
Fantastic. That's great. So good afternoon here, good evening maybe where you are, or possibly good morning, depending on which part of the world that you're listening to this in. Thank you to all of the previous speakers for, I think, setting the scene extremely clearly. So the first few slides that I have here, I can really kind of whiz over, because I think that previous speakers have already talked about this in detail, about the challenges and the really real impacts of lack of access to clean cooking fuels, everything from the impacts on women and children, the risk from injury and from violence from collecting fuels, the environmental impacts on deforestation and the impacts of deforestation on the water table and other factors of that nature, the economic impacts and so on. I think maybe the one thing to add also is that these polluting fuels themselves are also becoming more expensive. So in that sense, we also have not only the need to bring down the cost of alternatives, but the fact that actually there are increasingly going to be fewer and fewer of the existing use of polluting fuels available for families to purchase as the environmental crisis continues to hit many parts of the world. And obviously, of course, there are significant global dimensions to the continued use of polluting fuels for cooking. And whilst we most often talk about carbon in relation to the global dimensions of clean cooking, and carbon is important, and we know the role of carbon finance in supporting clean cooking interventions for many years, and it is of the same scale to that of the emissions, the carbon emissions that are produced by the global aviation industry. However, I think the other thing, and this is something we've been working with CCAC on for the last couple of years, is actually the black carbon and the methane and other elements of incomplete combustion that are actually driving the most recent and most important rapid rises in the global temperatures. So that makes it another reason for why this is actually such an important topic to deal with. And whilst I think I share Rashid's optimism that the tide is turning in terms of political prioritization, I think we do also need to bear in mind a number of factors. That firstly is that whilst the growing political prioritization and the beginnings of a shift around in actual deployment and the tackling of the clean cooking challenge, this issue is massive. Now, you might see the figure here, 4 billion that I've mentioned here. The figures that we often talk about are 2.1 billion. That 2.1 billion are people without any access to clean cooking whatsoever. From our estimations, it's somewhere between 3.5 and 4 billion that retain only partial access to clean cooking. So either no access at all or only partial access. And given stacking, the importance of stacking, we need to bear in mind why that is such an important figure. The other part of it is that some of the solutions that we had been promoting in previous decades actually haven't had the achievements that they had claimed for them or that they should have had. So, for example, the numbers of stoves that were purchased but then not utilized, or the numbers of stoves that were used only partially, and in terms then of what that means for the translation into the need, the health impacts or the carbon impacts or whatever it might be. So all of those kinds of factors, I think, are extremely important. We've been looking at this issue from the perspective of Modern Energy Cooking Services. We are a UK aid-funded programme that have been working on this for the last 7 or 8 years. We came into this issue around that real challenge, the fact that that this is a problem that has become ingrained. Wasn't getting the political priority that it needed, and the solutions that were being proffered didn't seem to be actually delivering the changes that we needed to see. And I think one of the reasons for that back then was that the debate had become incredibly siloed. It was all about fuels, individual fuels. You championed one technology and that you looked for the ways in which you could develop that technology. And it was like the magic bullet, as it were. I think what the big thing that we realized was that actually what needs to happen is for it to become ingrained as an important part of the decision-making process of government, so that it needed to become part of broader energy policy. And exactly what Rashid said right at the beginning of this session, that what we need is comprehensive, data-driven, multi-fuel strategies that allow us to get into the complexity of the situation in individual countries. And in addition, we would argue that actually one of the areas that had previously not been considered at all when we began working on this in 2018, no one was talking about electric cooking as a potential solution for Africa or indeed for large parts of South Asia. If we've achieved anything as a program, I think what we have achieved is actually to raise that profile, that now when we talk multi-fuel, we talk electricity as a significant part of that. And that's why I think we've been so delighted with the collaboration that we've had with AFREC, with Rashid and all of his colleagues, and the seriousness with which the continent is tackling the issue of clean cooking. So the report that Rashid mentioned is this one that I'm demonstrating here, Sustainable Scaling, Meeting the Clean Cooking Challenge in Africa. And what we tried to do in that report was establish some kind of a baseline and tracking of progress over recent decades, how we've ended up where we are, and then to go through a series of what are the issues that we really need to tackle for every single country to develop an evidence-based and targeted clean cooking program. So it's that then leads me to be somewhat, what's the word that I'm looking for? I get annoyed when there are some myths that are churned out frequently in gatherings about clean cooking. One of these is the point that's put forward that we don't need more research and reports. We don't need more data. We just need money in order to deliver stoves, or that the answers are known and are simple and we just need to act. If that was the case, this issue would have been dealt with 30 years ago. LPG companies, for example, would have just come in, done their bit, everyone would have LPG, and then we would obviously now be thinking about how do we transition away from LPG given the need for the transition away from fossil fuels. But I digress. The point of this report is that pathways to clean cooking are highly contextual and nationally specific. And what we need as a global community is better targeting and strategy design, and we need to match funding for delivery with funding for enhancing data-driven strategy development in partnership with every African country and every South Asian country that is struggling to reach their clean cooking targets. For us at MEX, one of the areas where we needed to do most work on understanding the complexities and the different pathways that can be taken was in relation to electric cooking. So whilst we've been looking multi-fuel, and we are a multi-fuel program, a lot of our attention is focused on the new entrant to the sector. And what we found is actually addressing the point Martina was making about affordability, is the sector is transforming rapidly. We have new, more efficient appliances. If you look at the e-cooking appliances, like the ones Peter, I'm sure we'll talk about later, their efficiency levels in comparison to what was on the market 10 years ago it's like treating chalk and cheese. They are so different from each other. Secondly, there's been detailed modeling that we've carried out and others have carried out on affordability in different contexts according to different circumstances. We've also ground truthed. We've gone into this question. The other thing that people often say to us is people don't like food that's cooked with electricity. We've gone into communities. We've done the detailed work in lots of different cultures with different types of cuisine, and we've done the ground truthing. Electric cooking fits most forms of cuisine, and the different appliances available fit it in different ways. There are all sorts of opportunities for innovative finance, pay-as-you-go, carbon methodology innovations, where electric cooking is by far the most carbon beneficial of all of the different opportunities. Therefore, it can secure higher prices, which means you can get a much more effective contribution, not a determination, but a contribution from carbon markets. And then finally, working with countries to deliver real programs demonstrating sustained uptake and job creation. And I think what we've then seen over the course of the last few years is the formation of a movement around electric cooking. We, as I think Martina mentioned, the Global Electric Cooking Coalition was launched in 2023. I did these slides a couple of days ago. This is actually already out of date. There are 37 members now within the coalition, and that coalition encompasses countries, international organizations, and so on and so forth. We're also beginning to see an increasing amount of finance dedicated for electric cooking coming from the global financial institutions. We've been working really closely closely with the African Development Bank, and last year, something like $15 million worth of funding for e-cooking initiatives were approved for East Africa, and we continue to discuss and debate with the AFDB over where that investment might go next. We also, with thanks to CCAC, have a project that's just initiating at the moment with the World Bank on how to better integrate e-cooking into the World Bank's energy access programming, and that's working with the Ascent program in sub-Saharan Africa and the IGPHF program in several states within India. We also can see an increasing number of carbon deals because of the higher tier possibilities. The largest of these was Up Energy's deal in Ghana recently under Article 6 that was facilitated through a World Bank bond. And we're also beginning to see the emergence of new, specifically targeted products, local manufacture. We've been doing some work in India there, looking at new entrants into the sector from there, particularly on the institutional side, but also many increasing number of first movers on manufacturing within the African continent. And then finally, we've also been developing a series of e-cooking strategies with individual governments that encompass a wide range of different types of support mechanisms. I think we're going to hear a little bit more about this from some of our colleagues later, but one of the biggest partnerships is with utilities. So utilities are beginning to see the massive role that e-cooking could play in demand creation, as Martina was mentioning at the outset. And we are living through a period where there is so much focus on new connections, new customers, the growth of electricity access. This gives us a really good opportunity to address consumer demand amongst those new customers right at the point where they begin consuming. Because one of the biggest problems that utilities face is the declining amount of consumption per capita as you go out into more remote areas of the country. So we've been working on multifaceted national strategies that incorporate utilities and ministries of energy and a whole host of other stakeholders in a number of specific countries. One of the most exciting recent developments, which we may hear more about a little bit later, is on on-bill financing. I've got a slide here where I talk a bit about this. Basically, on-bill financing is where you don't have to pay for the upfront cost of the appliance immediately, and you can pay it through your electricity bill. So in this particular case, the TANESCO initiative, 25% of every prepaid electricity purchase automatically gets allocated towards repayment. So there are a number of other countries that are beginning to look into this. We have actually an event with RETA, which is the renewable. I can't remember the name of that. I can't remember the acronym. It comes under the IEA, basically works with regulators. And we have a session looking at all of these kinds of issues later on this year in Loughborough in the UK. Alongside on-bill financing, there are a suite of other techniques that we're utilizing. For example, in both Tanzania and Uganda, we have quite a large program of collaboration with the Ministry of Energy in both countries that incorporates on-bill financing. In Uganda, it also incorporates a dedicated e-cooking tariff. We also have big institutional cooking programs that are beginning to emerge. We're also discussing the possibilities of bulk purchasing facilities, and the list is there, and I don't want to take up too much time, but national appliance standards, repair and maintenance systems, national awareness raising, and so on and so forth. It's also true, though, that a lot of the Mission 300 energy access work that's taking place at the moment will be off-grid. And what are the prospects for electric cooking on 100% renewables-based off-grid systems? We're beginning to see a significant take-up, but we are further off than we are in the case of grid-connected. For example, we, a couple of years ago, funded a series of 7 companies working on mini-grid incorporation of electric cooking. And from that work, this incorporates those 7 different studies on their business modeling. What we're able to find from those business models and the way in which e-cooking is taken into account in the formation of tariff levels, in the sizing of systems and so on, is that with e-cooking, you get a higher level of consumption per customer, which means the payoff point on the investment return is significantly lower. If you can see from the diagram here, that in the initial case on the mini-grid without e-cooking, the payoff point is around, for a mini-grid that was established last year, would be around 2032. In the case of where you have a significant e-cooking load, 50% of households, you actually get to that point by around 2027, 2028. And if you look at the overall returns by 2039, the grey on the right-hand graph shows the original amount of return you would have got. The light blue shows the increased amount of return that you would get. We've also been doing work on standalone systems, on market-ready standalone and rooftop innovations, and on building on real rural development programs where we're working with ready-made engagement with communities, which is the way in which I think the work we've done with Solco is really coming to the fore, where you need to work through a kind of comprehensive rural development approach to be able to incorporate, I think, standalone and nanogrid type systems effectively. So I've thrown an awful lot at you. What I want to leave you with is just the one statement that I think summarizes everything that I've said, which is that the key takeaway is that we should not be financing any energy access initiatives without taking into account the opportunities for electric cooking to be a key component of consumption. Thank you all very much, and I look forward to hearing more of the discussion as we evolve during the course of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for that insightful presentation. Basically for confirming that electricity can actually cook. You know, some of us grew in communities where we thought electricity is for lighting only. And basically we can't use it for any other thing. And then number two, for emphasizing the issue, the aspect of multi-fuels, in this case, in supporting a transition. And lastly, that clean cooking can assist in making energy projects more viable. Quite important points that I think we'll take forward as we proceed with the dialogue. Over to you, Sandra, for the next presentation.
Greetings, colleagues, and thank you so much. This has already been so incredibly fruitful. I've actually cut my presentation down because I'm really excited to hear from the panel, but I didn't want to miss this opportunity to say hello. My name is Sandra Cavalieri. I'm the Household Energy Hub Coordinator at the CCAC Secretariat, and I'm really pleased to share with you some new guidance that we have developed. And excuse me, one second. There we go. For those of you who don't know, we, together with our partners, especially leaning heavily on our colleagues Ed and colleagues at MEX, along with a lot of other organizations and countries, have developed the Air Quality Management Exchange platform. And I'll put this in the chat afterwards so you have the link. But what this platform does is set up step-by-step guidance, curated guidance for air quality managers who are interested in moving from one step to the another to reach the WHO air quality guidelines. And so when you go to our website, you can go to the curated guidance for air quality managers. And now we have new guidance focused on sectors. We've developed four sets of guidance for different, we've developed guidance for 4 different sectors. And so when you go to household energy, you'll see our first guidance, which is on expanding access to e-cooking. And each, when you get there, you'll find that we have broken this problem down into 10 steps that you can start with step 1 with a baseline assessment and move all the way through the institutional arrangements, the planning and design, the policy integration. When you go to the website and you click on each of these, you'll find a description, and you'll also find excellent resources for each step to help you orient yourself within the whole process. And you can scan this code, but I'll also put it in the chat. And if you are working on it and you're curious and you want to speak with us more, you can always email the Secretariat, or you can email me directly. This is being recorded, and my email was on the first slide, but I'm Sandra Cavalieri again from the CCAC, and really pleased to be here today and to work with all of you. So with that, I will turn over to James, back to you, Nixon, and over for us for hearing the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandra, for saving us some time. Really appreciated. And we'll be able to circulate the slides so that people can get your email, but also feel free to have it on the chat. For the delegates, just to reiterate, you can be able to access a language of your preference by selecting the interpretation button on your right-hand side. And then in case you have any question, I see a lot of questions coming up on the chat. Feel free to put them up. We'll be able to have some time at the end to address these questions. Over to you, James, for the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Nixon, and to AFREC for co-hosting this event today, and to my UNEP colleagues in Nairobi and also the CCAC for this collaboration. So my name is James Hazlip. I work at the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Centre, which provides science-based advisory on climate and clean energy to UNEP and other UN partners. We're also global co-leads for the Solco partnership, which Martina mentioned, alongside Last Mile Climate and the UN's interagency GPA. So it's my honor now to chair this panel session where we have 4 speakers from across Africa. So to start us off, I would like to invite Mr. Dudu Diouf, who is the head of the Domestic Fuel Division at the Directorate General of Hydrocarbons at the Ministry of Energy, Petroleum and Mines in Senegal. So I understand that Mr. Diouf will respond in French. I will ask the question in English and he'll respond in French. So that's a heads up to anyone who wants to switch the language. So thank you for joining us today, Mr. Diouf. Senegal is one of the 12 countries that unveiled an energy compact at the 2025 Mission 300 Africa Energy Summit. So in that context, what do you see to what extent, do you see eCooking as part of the clean cooking mix by 2035? And what are the main driving forces or motivations for eCooking in your country? Thank you. Over to you.
Merci, Monsieur James. Vous m'entendez?
Oui, oui.
Oui, ok, merci. Merci, Monsieur James. Merci à l'AFREC, la Commission africaine de l'énergie, aux panélistes et l'ensemble des participants pour cette rencontre combien bien utile pour l'Afrique, pour le monde et particulièrement pour l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Avant de répondre à votre question, je ferai un peu un survol de ce qui se fait au Sénégal et finir par répondre directement à la question posée. Bon, au Sénégal, il y a plusieurs aspects, plusieurs politiques, plusieurs projets et programmes qui ont été toujours mis en œuvre au niveau du secteur des combustibles domestiques et particulièrement de la cuisson propre. Tout au début, le problème c'était qu'il y a que des projets et programmes un peu orientés environnement avant que le Sénégal ne considère la cuisson propre comme un aspect énergétique qu'il faut adresser directement, comme on adresse les questions de l'accès à l'énergie. Et pour ce faire, on a élaboré une stratégie. Bon, il y a une première stratégie élaborée depuis 2016 et après 10 ans, il fallait revoir cette stratégie-là, l'adapter à la réalité de l'heure. C'est que le Sénégal a fait, a élaboré une nouvelle stratégie décanale pour la cuisson propre basée sur ce qu'on appelle le multi-fuel, on a dit tout à l'heure, le multi-combustible. Et pour la question spécifique, au niveau de nos pays et particulièrement au Sénégal, pour la cuisson propre et particulièrement pour la cuisson électrique, il faut régler toujours un préalable. Parce que dans notre stratégie, on a fait une étude au préalable, une enquête nationale. Et tu vois que pour les statistiques, il y a toujours 1 600 000 tonnes de bois utilisées pour uniquement la cuisson domestique. 1 600 000 tonnes de bois. Il y a plus de 700 000 tonnes de charbon de bois utilisé, consommé par les ménages pour une année. Il y a aussi plus de 253 000 tonnes de butane aussi consommée par les ménages. Ces données nous ont permis de voir qu'il y a toujours cette consommation exponentielle du bois énergie au niveau des ménages. Et pour adresser la question, il faut naturellement allier plusieurs combustibles. Le butane en fait partie, la bioénergie globalement, mais aussi la cuisson électrique, le e-cooking. Mais pour réussir le e-cooking, il faut réussir un préalable, l'accès à l'énergie, globalement. Des ménages qui sont connectés au réseau directement de la Sénélec, c'est-à-dire le distributeur d'électricité au niveau national, et d'autres qui développent des systèmes de connectivité sociale avec le solaire, l'éolien, etc. Mais aussi, il faut une politique beaucoup plus globale avec la stratégie gaz to power. Parce que le Sénégal a découvert du gaz. Pour encourager les ménages à utiliser le e-cooking, au-delà de l'accès, il faut aussi adresser la question des tarifs. Et sur ce, il faut naturellement essayer de changer le fil lourd qu'on utilise pour la production de l'électricité avec du gaz. Comme le Sénégal a du gaz, on a bâti une stratégie basée sur la production de l'électricité avec le gaz. Qu'est-ce que cette politique permettrait? Ça permettrait de faire baisser le tarif, surtout le tarif social, qui tourne autour de 82-83 francs le kilowattheure au Sénégal. Mais si ce tarif-là est encore baissé, ça permet aux ménages d'utiliser naturellement le e-cooking. C'est une stratégie globale qui englobe pratiquement toute la politique énergétique au Sénégal à ce moment. Il y a des avancées qu'on est en train de faire dessus, mais il y a toujours la réalité de l'heure qu'il faut adresser avec ce que j'ai dit tout à l'heure, le multi-combustible. Nous avons des programmes nationaux, un programme national biogaz domestique du Sénégal qui produit du biogaz pour les ménages urbains, périurbains et ruraux. Il y a aussi des projets qui diffusent des foyers améliorés. On a diffusé plus de 800 000 avec un projet qui vient de se clôturer avec NDF Fonds Vert Climat sur un financement Fonds Vert. Il y a aussi des entrepreneurs qui développent des systèmes de technologie de consommation, moyens de charbon et de bois que nous encourageons. C'est des systèmes de transition. Comme on ne peut pas régler définitivement tout à l'heure la question, il faut réduire la consommation, c'est avec des technologies qui consomment moins de charbon, des technologies efficaces. C'est aussi, ça fait partie de nos politiques, l'efficacité et l'efficience dans la technologie. Donc le Sénégal a 3 voire 4 piliers: le gaz to power, le renouvelable et l'efficacité énergétique, mais aussi la connectivité sociale, pour un peu répondre à votre question, James.
Thank you, Dudu. That was a very comprehensive answer, and you flagged the importance of the multi-fuel strategy, which I think many countries are pursuing, and that's legitimate and logical. The importance of tariff reform to enable access to e-cooking, and the different fuel mixes there. So I just had one quick follow-up question on what is your country doing to break the traditional disconnect that exists between electrification policy and planning and clean cooking policy and planning, these things being traditionally sort of siloed within governments, perhaps even different ministries. So how are you in Senegal working to overcome that disconnect? Thank you.
Oui, bon, je l'ai un peu brossé tout à l'heure, parce que bon, il y a une politique d'électrification rurale qui est très organisée. Au début, on laissait la cuisson propre un peu éparpillée. Désormais, il faut inclure cette politique-là de cuisson propre au cœur des politiques énergétiques. Ça vous permet de faire une meilleure planification. Je vous ai parlé tout à l'heure d'une stratégie des canaux. Ça vous permet de prendre des décisions sur un long terme, mais aussi de les séquencer avec avec des résultats à mi-parcours. Ça vous permet de réorienter au fur et à mesure et de s'adapter aux réalités de l'heure. Bon, je l'ai entendu tout à l'heure sur la question des financements. C'est toujours un goulot d'étranglement, mais ça ne nous doit pas nous bloquer définitivement, parce qu'il y a toujours des solutions qu'on peut trouver, parce qu'en Afrique, le souci, c'est que parfois, on développe de très bonnes technologies, si on peut les développer au niveau local ou bien les importer, mais le coût d'acquisition pose problème. Mais il y a toujours des politiques qu'on essaie d'élaborer pour permettre aux ménages d'avoir une technologie qu'ils utilisent et qu'ils payent dans le tas. Ça aussi, c'est dans une stratégie globale de la politique énergétique que nous avons élaborée au Sénégal. Avoir une vision dans le long terme, mettre les politiques de cuisson propre au cœur des politiques énergétiques, mettre ça dans les lettres de politique et de développement des secteurs de l'énergie, et élaborer ça comme on élabore les politiques d'accès à l'électricité, parce que aujourd'hui on parle particulièrement de eCooking, et je l'ai dit tantôt, avant eCooking, il faut avoir l'accès, parce que j'ai participé récemment à la ministérielle de l'AIE à Paris, mais les chiffres de l'AIE disent qu'il y a 2 milliards de personnes qui n'ont pas accès à l'énergie. Donc, quand on parle de hiérarchisation des choses, il faut avoir l'accès à l'énergie, surtout à l'électricité, pour pouvoir parler de eCooking. Donc, c'est pourquoi le Sénégal a élaboré cette stratégie-là d'accès universel des ménages, parce que dans nos pays africains, il y a beaucoup de localités rurales. Il faut les connecter, qu'ils aient de l'électricité à bas coût pour leur permettre d'encourager l'utilisation de cette électricité pour la cuisson. C'est notre stratégie globale.
Thank you, Dudu. That was really good, and I think that also speaks to the scope of this webinar, first webinar on hope and the household reality. Of course, access is a long way to go in many African countries. The starting point is quite low, so really important to bear that in mind. Thank you so much. We'll now invite our delegate from Tanzania, Engineer Benizeth Kabuduguru, who is an energy engineer working in the newly formed Clean Cooking Unit at the Ministry of Energy in Tanzania. So welcome, Benizeth, and thank you for joining us today. Tanzania is one of the countries that has, in recent years, made good progress in advancing access to clean cooking as well as electrification as well, and also providing a high level of political support as a co-chair to the first Clean Cooking Summit in 2024. So with that in mind, could you summarize the main driving forces or motivations in Tanzania for investing in clean cooking, and to what extent the Energy Compact will boost the role of e-cooking by 2034? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, James, and the members that are attending this webinar in different level of their attendance. This is a great moment for us as a country, Tanzania, to share our experience, specifically on e-cooking as one of the solutions that we have mentioned in the strategy that we read as to get to the national target from the strategy itself. So, responding to what you have raised as a question of interest, our country launched the National Clean Cooking Strategy in 2024, and this could give us now one of the key motivations toward the advancing the access to clean cooking, because it clearly gives us a roadmap to where we are heading to the 10 years of implementation of the strategy, and gives a clear law that every ministry has to do. This comprehensive framework of government working gives us a momentum to take into account clean cooking agenda as one of the national agenda, because starting from the Minister of Energy as the custodian of the strategy, but also taking on board other ministries that are implementing various initiatives. Then this is one of the key motivation that could give us a momentum or an acceleration to reach to the target that we envision come 2034. The other motivation from this perspective could also be the political will. You all know that our President, Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, has been championing the agenda both at national level but also in international level. So this gives us collectively a motivation for us to advance the public to transition to clean cooking. Now, getting to unveiling what the Energy Compact gives us or takes us to get to what we envision to achieve by 2034. The Energy Compact gives us another ambitious way of getting to the target that we envision by 2034. That is to get 80% of the Tanzanians transition to clean cooking, but yet from the Energy Compact itself, it portrays the need for us to get access of 75% of clean cooking solutions by 2030. So that comes a bit very ambitious than what we even envisioned through the strategy. And this is also reflected from the pillar number 3 of the Energy Compact itself, which speaks of this access to clean cooking, but also the 75% access to 75% access to electricity. So just blending in e-cooking into its context from the compact itself, we see that through these initiatives that we are going to undertake through the Energy Compact, and of course the ongoing electrification projects and densification projects for electricity connection to our people, then e-cooking comes in, because James comes now as a matter of priority now. What comes first? Because you would never think of supplying an electric appliance to a user, yet he or she is not connected. So we think unveiling all the targets that are within the Energy Compact, the Tanzanian, the Energy Compact, this also will give us a momentum to get fast to where we need to be come 2034 as a target from the strategy itself. Yeah.
Thank you, Benazet. And yes, you've highlighted there a few things, including the importance, and this was something Martina highlighted earlier, of stimulating both the demand and supply side. It's a bit of a chicken and egg sort of calculation. So it's great to see Tanzania, pursuing that strategy with high level leadership, a multi-fuel strategy. I think I would also ask the same question I asked to Dudu about how your country is tackling the legacy silo issue of clean cooking, on the one hand, as a traditionally a biomass or maybe LPG focused agenda, and electrification, which normally has its own governance and ministerial oversight. How are those two things being married or reconciled in Tanzania with a view to grow the market for e-cooking? Can you say something about that?
Yes, I would say the national clean cooking strategy takes into account the multi-fuels, because as we know, we have our people from different localities and geographical locations. In such a sense, you would find that a fuel that is much accessible in a certain part of the country could not be very much accessible to another part of the country. So taking into account the multi-fuels, this gives us a way of, getting all of them on board, but also taking into account the aspects of affordability, reliability, scalability, all these aspects being taken into account. But when it comes now to e-cooking, James, our country, as I speak now, we have about, I would say, all 12,318 villages electrified. That gives us a potential of e-cooking in its essence. Now we are moving to electrifying hamlets, that's densification projects, which means we are expanding also the scope of electricity connectivity. So this is a potential behind e-cooking in Tanzania, and in such a sense, now is one of the solution or the clean cooking solution that could give us a way to move fast, because once our people are well connected, then it is easy for us now to get them aware that instead of maybe using electricity just for lighting your house or or using it for other domestic uses, then you could opt using electricity also for cooking. So it's part of just awareness raising and letting our people know that, and saying that we are thanking also MEX for piloting one of the projects in Tanzania on part of on-bill financing, that people could be struggling on getting the upfront costs of the initial buying of the appliances, but through on-bill financing, once they are paying a retro on their bills, on their electricity bills, then this could give us a way to move even fast. So we are engaging our institutions, and that's the Rural Energy Agency and TANESCO, to the possible ways of, setting up this kind of a pilot to more customers, so that as we keep on electrifying the country, but then we could also use the same opportunity on raising awareness on the importance of tapping into the opportunity of e-cooking. Yeah, so in brief, that could be what I see. So it's actually not a disconnect, but as I said, it's about the priority now. What comes first and what is next? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Benazeth. And you raised the importance there of awareness raising for demand creation, and also tariff reform to scale on-grid e-cooking uptake. So that's really important points. Thank you so much. So we've heard from two government officials representing two member states. And we're now switched to two panelists from the private sector. And I'll first invite Peter Scott, who's the CEO and founder of Burn, to join the panel. And Burn is Africa's leading clean cooking company, having sold over 6 million biomass, LPG, and electric cooking appliances across 12 countries over the last 15 years, including the IoT-enabled Ecoa induction cooker, which I believe is actually assembled in Kenya. And this equates to wood fuel savings of almost 40 million tons, generating almost 10 million gold standard carbon credits. So thank you, Peter, for joining us. And I hope you'll appreciate the commercial plug there and honor us with some answers to some questions that we've prepared. Kicking off with really what's been the most important enabler of your expansion into the e-cooking market specifically? Was it national policies or incentives? Was it carbon financing or consumer financing or something else? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, James, and thanks for the plug. Pleasure to be here. Well, you know, there's been a number of different things that have driven us into that market that have been key for us to have success there. You know, we've done about 60,000 IoT electric kits so far, and this year we'll probably do another 150,000. But yeah, carbon obviously was a big opportunity for us. So you know, the potential to generate substantial credits from these devices, also investor appetite for willing to invest to help subsidize these projects. Also, you know, there's been some grant funding from the likes of NEFCO or DIT, UK Catalyst, also from the European Investment Bank. But really, the last few years, I've taken all of the profit from my biomass business and rolled it into electric. So it's very much been kind of self-funded for us. So we've put almost $20 million into this. You know, it's been an enormous, to sort of echo Ed's points, it's been an enormous R&D effort. You know, it makes Pego Solar look like invading Venezuela, or sorry, that's a bad joke. It's you know, doing electric cooking, IoT, blending it with carbon, blending it with Pego, bringing behavior change, all of those things. It's been a huge lift from hardware, software, firmware, product market fit, business models. And so, yeah, you know, we kind of like, we rolled the dice on the business to really scale this. And yeah, we're very bullish about induction cooking. And it's, you know, it's very much ready for prime time in sort of 5 or 6 countries that we feel like now. Other countries, it's maybe not going to be the right fit. You know, one of the challenges in, say, West Africa, you'll see that LPG prices are quite low, and then it's harder for electric to be competitive in those markets. Whereas in East and Southern Africa, you know, it's a very simple economic value proposition. You know, cooking with electric, induction electric is much cheaper than LPG and charcoal, so it's kind of a no-brainer. And I guess that kind of brings us a little bit to the what are the policy environments, or what are the barriers to it. And I would say in many countries, the government's national strategy is still tied to LPG. And so they're still thinking LPG is the answer. But the reality is you can generate very few carbon credits. You're burning 4x to, you know, import fuel in most cases from, you know, like from Oman or wherever. Now you can see with what's happening in the Gulf, there's lots of supply chain risks, pricing risks. And so, you know, these grids, many of the grids in Africa are very renewable. And so it's just a no-brainer in a million different ways just to pivot to electric cooking. So it's good, we're making progress, but still the government is still trying to roll out an LPG strategy. Obviously now with new political developments in the US, we're seeing more of a push for that, for this fossil fuel solution. You know, we have an LPG stove, we're doing a massive ramp up of LPG in Nigeria. So it's not like we're against LPG, it's just that, you know, where is the real opportunity? And, you know, let's not push LPG where you could push electric, you know, to our sorry, I can't pronounce Beneze's name, but in Tanzania is probably the best market in Africa for electric cooking. And so let's make sure we drive that and get aligned. And obviously we work closely with the Tanzanian government to bring, you know, electric cooking and, you know, again, not have them tied to LPG. But sorry, I think I'm answering multiple of your questions, James. So maybe I'll put it back to you.
Thank you, Peter. I'm actually looking, and you've basically answered all the questions in one go. So that's what you get when you get a sneak preview. So thank you for that. That was very concise.
But I guess I know there was two more. I'm happy to, or I guess there's
Well,
things
I think you've answered them actually, and you know, was the other ones were really about the policy barriers to uptake, and I think, as you said, and something Ed mentioned about context specific, you know, each country is different, you know, and what makes sense in one country may not make sense in another. So we shouldn't be dogmatic about it. We need to be pragmatic and also respecting political strategies and priorities, etc. One you did mention, yes, you have your hand up. Go.
Well, I was going to say about the fossil fuels in the grid and then the off-grid piece of it.
Oh, yes. Yeah, actually, if you could say something about that. Yeah, basically, to what extent do you anticipate the growth of a renewably powered off-grid e-market in e-cooking market in Africa? Yeah.
Yeah, we're not particularly bullish on that. Our whole focus is on grid urban. I mean, there's again Tanzania, Ghana, certain places where the rural electric grid is viable. But for the main, you know, the low hanging fruit is urban on grid where you're displacing charcoal. You know, mini grids are often in places where people, you know, can't afford electricity for cooking. They do, you know, they have access to biomass, firewood, and you know, firewood is less of a driver of deforestation and climate disruption than charcoal. So yeah, for us, the main focus is urban on grid. The cost, I think, for off grid as well is quite challenging. So you know, I hope, you know, maybe in 5 years from now we'll be able to get the prices down. But again, that's just a very heavy lift.
Yeah.
In terms of the fossil fuel and the grid, yeah, you know, interestingly enough, you can still generate carbon credits even if the grid is relatively fossil fuel dependent, just because the delta between, you know, making charcoal and versus making the small amount of electricity to power the stove each day, there's still actually quite a strong case for that. So, you know, but yeah, I guess there's also sort of a larger question just about, do we really want to transition people over to giant coal-fired grids? You look at Indonesia, for example, they want to get away from LPG, but then it's going to an electric grid very much powered by coal, and that's not really our focus. But you know, in countries, certainly sub-Saharan Africa, where you see a mix, a growing supply of renewable electricity, then that makes sense to us.
Yeah. Thanks. You're absolutely right. And you mentioned carbon financing as part of the means to finance the ECOA. And I mean, that's a whole Pandora's box. And we haven't agreed on the scope of the follow-up sessions in this mini-series, but one of them will likely be partly, if not solely, on carbon financing and its role in enabling the clean cooking transition. And that, of course, is topical given the failure of cocoa networks and their perhaps over-dependence on carbon financing. Did you want to come in one more time?
Very quickly, yeah. Just that, you know, that carbon finance has never been in better shape. Cocoa was very much an outlier, and it'd be great to have another session on it. But the idea that carbon finance is in trouble is it's the actual opposite. It's never been stronger and all that stuff. So
the devil's in the detail, and we did see. I very much liked the post that was from the Byrne account, I think, on LinkedIn, giving a sort of position on, and that there's been some varied analysis, I would say, online, and it's about robustness, and I think we'll definitely cover that in a follow-up session. We don't want to go too far down that today. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us, and it's a nice segue, I think, because you mentioned greening the grids and how that is an enabler of e-cooking. So that leads us smoothly to our last panelist, Irene Wanjohi, who I invite to join us now. And Irene is the Principal Sales Growth Officer at Kenya Power, the national utility in Kenya that is responsible for delivering electricity to over 9 million customers across the country. And Irene leads the sales growth team, driving innovative demand stimulation strategies that support sustainable unit growth while advancing Kenya's clean energy transition. So that sounds fantastic. And also very much the center of attention, Kenya, ahead of the IEA second summit on clean cooking. So really apt in that sense. Thank you, Irene, for joining us. So I just wanted to set the scene a little bit and then ask a question. Kenya has a dedicated national e-cooking strategy, and that aims to transition 10% of households to e-cooking by 2028. So that's quite an ambitious target. And that, of course, leverages the country's high grid connectivity, over 75%, so much higher than it is in Senegal, for example, we heard earlier, partly as a means to reduce biomass reliance. And then key strategies, I understand, include VAT waivers, carbon financing, and targeted subsidies to address high appliance costs. So that all sounds very good. But what specifically is KPLC working on with the government of Kenya and stakeholders to help achieve that 10% by 28 target? Over to you, Irene.
Good afternoon, good morning for those who it's morning. First, I'd like to agree with what Ed said, that access must go hand in hand with e-cooking. That is something we have realized in Kenya, and that is something that, as agreed, we have decided must happen. Where we extend the access, we must extend it with e-cooking. So Ed, that one, we've already boarded. We're together on that one. With the government, to answer your question, I think what I want to say is that Kenya Power has been working together with the government very, very closely. We have been working on a tariff study that together with MEX, on a tariff study just to see, is it possible to have a tariff in Kenya that supports e-cooking? That's a study that we are having, because on the Kenya Power side, the question has been, how can we operationalize such a tariff? If such a tariff was to come, first of all, how do we operationalize it? If everybody's cooking with electricity, how then do we make sure that they do not, how do we know that people are cooking, first of all, with electricity? How do we know how many people are cooking with electricity? Because as it is now, we think maybe less than even 0.5% are cooking with electricity. So we need to first of all establish that people are actually cooking with electricity, and that electricity has actually been adopted by Kenyans, or that it's going to be adopted by Kenyans. Because when we speak to people, a lot of people fuel stuck. So we have been working with the government on that study. The other way we are working with the government is institutional cooking. There is a school feeding program in Kenya, where the realization has been there that a lot of students fall out of school because they're hungry. Maybe they're out collecting firewood, or there's a reason they've not come to school because of hunger. And so there's a program to feed school children. In Nairobi only, there's a school feeding kitchen that is there, where they cook food at a particular place and they distribute it to the schools. So we are working with the government to ensure that there is a clean cooking for schools, for institutions. And we're trying to ensure that at least 10% of those institutions or more can be allocated to electric cooking. Now, question has been, if students are cooking with electricity, they are being cooked with electricity, will they then riot and be on the streets because there was an outage? So the other thing that we're working on is on the grid, and working together with the stakeholders, the suppliers who supply to those schools. We're making sure that we work hand in hand together, that any school that is on electric cooking, our O&M teams know, and the county managers know that this school is cooking with electricity. So when there's an outage coming, they know that there's going to be an outage. So that's one way to make sure that as we adopt into to e-cooking, it's not received by the Kenyans as a field project. So that if the school is cooking with the electricity, they must eat that day. So if there's going to be an outage, we announce it early so that they reprogram themselves so they can cook at the time that serves them right, and then we can switch off, switch on when they have already cooked. So that's the other way we are working with the stakeholders. Then as Kenya Power, we do not sell any appliances. We work with stakeholders. We work with Peter Scott, for example. We work with the Tefals, all the people who produce or manufacture appliances. Our work mainly is to create awareness. As somebody said here, cooking with electricity is one of the things that we have grown knowing is an expensive venture. But with the world changing and new appliances coming in, we have realized that cooking with electricity is actually cheaper than cooking with very, very many of the appliances that are there today. It's cheaper than cooking even with LPG. If you use the right appliances, it's cheaper than cooking with charcoal. For example, today in Kenya, if you're to cook with an EPC, even with an induction cooker on foods, it's cheaper to cook with electricity than to cook with charcoal. And sometimes if you're buying fuel, for example, for schools who buy fuels, they sometimes use 7,000 shillings per week to cook food. Yet if they were to use electricity, they use just about 2,000 shillings to cook the same food that they were cooking. So there's savings if you're cooking with electricity. So what we're doing is create awareness. We do not sell, so what we do is we work with stakeholders. Everywhere we go to create awareness, we work and work with the stakeholders to go and create awareness. We cook food, we do live demonstrations so that people can see. We do use meters so that people can also witness how much energy that we've used. We calculate together with them, then they taste the food. Once they've tasted the food, they're witnesses that it actually tastes maybe the same as what they are cooked at home or even better. We also hold competitions in several villages where we've gone, where people say, oh, my githeri, that's a local food here in Kenya, is better when it's cooked with charcoal or firewood. We hold competitions, and then after we've cooked with, maybe we cook with charcoal, we cook with firewood, then we cook with electricity. We blindfold people and we tell you choose the food that was cooked with electricity. And more often than not, the one that was cooked with they choose the one that was cooked in their way. If it is fuel, if it is charcoal, if it is firewood. More often than not, they will choose the electricity, the electric cooked food as the one that was the way they thought it was. And so we are trying to kill the myth that you can only cook with firewood for food to taste the way it should taste, or you can only cook with charcoal for food to taste the way that it should taste. And teaching people that you can adopt electric cooking to suit you. So that's how we are working with the government. We've also, through MEX and other stakeholders, we've opened hubs. We've opened 5 hubs in 5 different areas of Kenya, from across Makueni all the way to Kisumu, for those who know Kenya. We've opened hubs where people can visit those hubs and learn how to cook with electricity. We also have our own hubs as Kenya Power. We have 4 hubs where we cook. We have live demonstrations. People walk in free of charge. Twice a week we cook, and people come in and taste the food, see the appliances, and learn how to use these appliances. We also have a mobile kitchen. This again, courtesy of MEX. Ed was part of it. Courtesy of MEX, we have a mobile kitchen. We're able to go to the remotest village to show that you can cook with electricity. We go, we stop wherever we have electricity, we get a service line to the vehicle, and we're able to cook and show the people how to cook. So I think I've answered your question. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Irene. That was really good. And the second question, yeah, you have answered it basically about what Kenya Power is doing to enable or encourage adoption of e-cooking. And I think it's inspirational what your company is doing for other grid operators across the continent. And first of all, pointing out that e-cooking is often cheaper than the baseline. And due to highly efficient appliances, and your work of raising awareness, demonstrations, and I know that's something that MEX have done a lot on. I like the idea of the blind taste challenge to overcome myths, which seems a persistent issue. And then just your point about structuring an e-cooking tariff, or the challenges in doing so in a fair and effective way. And I'm wondering whether the rise of IoT connected smart grids and appliances could actually send the data needed to differentiate between cooking appliances and other appliances. Is that something, I'm not a technical expert on that, but I'm wondering whether that is actually now something that can be done and measured and for tariff and billing purposes. Have you looked into that?
Yeah, that's a game changer. When we first started the conversation, we didn't know about IoTs. Now the IoTs are here with us. We know about it. We have a project that is coming on board soon, and we want to have our own IoT program where we can collect data ourselves and check how. I think, I don't know if you're an engineer, but most engineers here would agree with me that what they say, at least from my end, what our engineers say is numbers talk. And the question is, how many are cooking with electricity? Irene, how much? What is the demand? How many units are being used up? And so that's a question that has been very hard for us to answer. And does it make sense for us to have a tariff? And when that comes up, I have not really been having anything to hold on to. I think Peter Scott knows I've been knocking his door a lot, asking for data to support the tariff study or the tariff on our end. So right now we are looking at tariff. The tariff is changing in Kenya, and because of this tariff study that we've been having, we have a little data that we have handed into the people who now come up with the commerce section that comes up with the tariff that we present to our regulators. So we will use that to present something to the regulator, and from the tariff study, and from also what we are going to be collecting ourselves from the fields, from the IoT. But the question, the big elephant, big white elephant, is how do we operationalize it in Kenya? Are we going to have another meter in the kitchen, in every kitchen? Are we going to have meter separations such that the rest of the house is wired separately from the kitchen? So those are questions that are still on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Thank you. And hopefully the technology is on our side and will help overcome these challenges. Thank you so much, Irene. And I'm just looking at the clock. We're already over time, and my apologies for that. So I will thank you, Irene, and then pass back to Nixon, who is really moderated or MC. And I don't know, Nixon, if we have time to take some of the questions from the audience, but I'll leave that decision to you if that's okay. Thank you, Nixon.
Thank you, James, and thanks to the panelists for that insightful discussion. I will request that we take 10 additional minutes from our delegates to answer 2 questions, and then my colleague will come in to give us a summary of what we have been able to cover today. And my first question would go to Ed, if you are still around, just to emphasize on 2 things. I think there's a question that has come in on how we address the issue of cost when we introduce on-bill financing, whether it becomes a barrier for people then being able to afford electricity, because we know affordability is also another angle that we should be able to look at. So by loading the 25% on the cost of electricity on the monthly bill, does it affect affordability? And then the issue of grid reliability. I think you can speak to that. This representative from Zambia is alluding to the challenges that have been in the country in terms of electricity reliability and whether they should still push for the clean cooking, electric cooking agenda specifically. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nixon. They're two really good questions that I won't really have, I think, the time to do justice to. So I've been trying my best to answer questions in the Q&A. So hopefully those have been seen and I've been able to put things there. The other thing is, if folks are interested in discussing further with us at MEX, then do please reach out to me. My email address is e.d.brown@lboro.ac.uk, but I'm sure that you can find me if you search. On the two specific questions, I think the issue of cost is always going to be there. The whole point of the on-bill financing is obviously to offset the upfront cost. But I think it's a really interesting question as to, is the portion of the bill that is going to meet the costs of the appliances going to be affordable for those that undertake it? I think the question there is, one is over what period of time the appliance cost is spread, and that's one of the questions that we're looking at on the development of that program, and indeed in other places where we're looking at on-bill financing. But the second thing is, of course, if you are already expending, on polluting fuel. So, for example, as we've been hearing, in many cases where folks are getting access to the on-bill financing and paying their electricity bills, they will have stopped paying out for charcoal, for example, or for LPG or whatever fuel they've previously been using, and will be utilizing the electricity for certainly a significant portion of their cooking. So that obviously generates return itself. So every individual will make that decision for themselves in terms of, is this something that is affordable for me to do? And all that I think we can do as developers and as those with interest in how we can accelerate the transition is work on what is the most acceptable pricing point, percentage of payment, etc. And is of course not the first time that this has been done. It's been done in relation, for example, to the steamer program in Kenya, where you're paying for that initial connection to the grid over the first couple of years of your payments to KPLC. So there is I think an approach that where that kind of individual economic decision is made by each customer as to whether or not they think that it's affordable, and it gives the choice to them. In that sense, it means that actually they would still be having to take that decision if they were going to go and purchase an appliance outright. So it's actually, if anything, it's making that economic decision easier because you're not having to make that single upfront cost. So I think that's how I would answer that one. On Zambia, we have begun to do some work on Zambia. We've been supporting a couple of studies, obviously, where the grid is unstable and where the consumption is overloading the supply. It's going to be tricky to persuade the utility that they want to significantly increase consumption. I think Zambia is interesting because there is already quite a significant proportion of people cooking with electricity. So I think as I think the person who asked the question was commenting, actually stressing the use of particularly efficient electric appliances within that context can be very useful. And then also perhaps talking with the utility about the potential increases in consumption per customer that could be achieved by increasing the use of electric cooking, and therefore that translating into new forms of generation or new forms of distribution across the system. I think ultimately it goes back to my point right at the beginning, which is that if countries are going to embrace the opportunities that electric cooking provide, then it has to do so as part of a comprehensive approach to the economics of their energy system. So it becomes part and parcel of the discussions over the investment within the national electricity system, the levels of consumption that it can expect and can assume in terms of then planning for new investments into generation infrastructure and so on. So in that sense, it's far better for a country to have their electric cooking built into comprehensive, effective planning for the energy sector, rather than it being seen as a piecemeal kind of fuel by fuel individualized approach, which is what really had dominated until recent years. So Nixon, I don't know whether I've managed to answer those two questions effectively, but I'll leave it there and pass back to you.
No, thanks. I think you have done that quite well. Basically, we do understand the situation in Zambia, but then it's not a permanent issue. So even as the country focuses on addressing the reliability issues, there is an opportunity to include electric cooking in the overall planning, quite significant there. And also the aspect of culture, which I think has already been spoken to. I think I will not ask this one. I will skip because I know the representative from KPLC did give us a few of some of the tips that they are doing to address the issues of culture, having demonstrations on clean cooking, competitions around this, challenges to cook different meals, just to demystify the issues to do with the electric cooking and whether the food is as sweet as when you use firewood. At this point, because of time, I will invite my colleague, Daniel, to come in to give a brief in terms of what we have been able to cover today and also give a vote of thanks as we close the session. Over to you, Daniel.
Hello, can you hear me, Nixon?
Yes, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much. I would like to thank everyone for joining this very important webinar today. I will just quickly give like a quick summary of what we have discussed. An important point has been made about having only 35% access to clean cooking in Africa. So of course, this presents a huge potential opportunity to close the gap. But also very important is a comment made by the director of AFREC, where he talks about why we have to use a diverse basket of solutions to move forward, meaning that we have to look at this as a basket of fuels across Africa and to be strategic in terms of how we pair the available fuels to the clean cooking challenges we have in each of these countries. Also to mention the points from UNEP talking about how, if we go in this direction, we of course have the potential to prevent 800,000 plus deaths within the continent, and also to improve the air quality. Most important also is a statement from Ed, where he talks about the pathways to clean cooking being very highly contextual and nationally specific. And I think this has been very common across all of the guest speakers today and the panelists, highlighting the fact that for us to address the clean cooking challenges, we have to ensure that we take into account very specific contexts, also as relates to what we see within our countries. Also interesting to note is the gentleman from Senegal, where he talks about how they've managed to integrate into their energy planning also clean cooking. I think this has also appeared in most of the discussions where we believe that clean cooking should not just be a side piece, but should be something that should be integrated into the energy planning. Of course, as we begin to look at eCooking as one of the potential pathways for us to use. One important point by the gentleman from Tanzania, Mr. Benizet, was also about the political will, where he mentions that the president is championing the agenda, and then of course this gives the people, the ministry, the momentum to be able to move on with how they approach the challenge, and also how creating the awareness can also be an important motivator for creating enough demand. Mr. Peter Scott mentioned something quite interesting about the IoT e-cooking and induction cooking, and of course, something quite interesting to tally back to the initial statement by Mr. Ed, where he mentioned that in West Africa, it is cheaper to use LPG than to use e-cooking. And of course, in East Africa, we have the flip reaction where it is cheaper to use e-cooking than to use LPG. And of course, we understand the context because in West Africa, for example, they have cheaper LPG thanks to, for example, countries like Nigeria, where they produce enough oil and enough fuels and they're able to also refine, as compared to in East Africa, where they have to do a lot of importation. Of course, and to Madam Irene's point, very important point about how do we determine the tariff for e-cooking, and also do we have to do like separate wiring systems, separate metering systems. And I think what this dialogue has shown us is, again, back to what Mr. Ed has said, that we need to look at this also as an opportunity to continue a lot of research and development when it comes to clean cooking, because of course this dialogue alone has shown us that there are potential areas for research and development to ensure that we continue creating solutions that meet, the current trends and needs of our people within Africa. And of course, from the socio-cultural perspective, which is also very important, Ms. Irene has also mentioned the context of having competitions, asking questions about if the food tastes better with e-cooking than with any other sauce. And I think this is also very interesting because in some countries, people would argue and say using charcoal, for example, gives the food a different taste or flavor. I'm sure you all know about the jollof rice, right? People say, look, if you cook jollof rice with the charcoal, it tastes better than cooking with, for example, even with, e-cooking or LPG. In summary, I think there's been really strong points. And I would say like the first thing to highlight is the point around context, to ensure that we look at this from a basket of fuels, and we are developing solutions within the context in which they are needed. The second very strong point here is also that there's need for continuous R&D. Studies must continue because we need to create these solutions based on what is needed. If you create a nice product and the people do not need or want the product, then we have a mismatch. So continuous R&D is very important. We have also the socio-cultural aspect, where we need to continue to create the awareness, have competitions, ensure that we don't create solutions that do not align with people's historical and cultural heritages. And of course, one interesting point would also be about how do we ensure that we create a potential market for renewable energy powered e-cooking. So for example, in areas where there are solar PV, wind-based mini grids, how do we create a market for e-cooking in those scenarios that doesn't impact heavily on the pricing for a unit of energy, for example, or on the pricing of the capital for this project. So I would like to thank everyone for making our time to join today, to all our guest speakers and panelists. Thank you very much for the very insightful presentations and highlights from all your experiences. It's been very enlightening. And on behalf of AFREC, the Executive Director, and all the colleagues and partners, we thank you very much for joining the meeting. And we look forward to the other parts of the series, and we invite you again to join us. And of course, most importantly, we hope that you can take the lessons that we have gotten from today's session, and we hope that it would challenge us to look deeper into all of the context and all the research that needs to be done, and hopefully we create workable, feasible solutions for the people of Africa. Thank you very much.